We all love action movies for their chaos, the roaring engines, the gunfire, the impossible stunts that seem to bend reality. But what if I told you some filmmakers weren't bending reality, they were ignoring it entirely? Behind the scenes of some of the most intense action films ever made, there are stories not of special effects, but of real danger, of bullets that weren't fake, of actors who bled not from makeup, but from actual wounds. These weren't carefully rehearsed illusions. They were moments where the pursuit of realism went so far, it broke the boundaries of cinema and crossed into something far more disturbing. Some did it for artistic vision, others for ego. A few, simply because they didn't know where the line was or didn't care. There are films where helicopters decapitated actors, where lions mauled the crew, where actors suffered strokes and heart attacks mid-scene, where the camera didn't just capture performance, it recorded trauma. And here's the darkest irony. Many of those scenes never even made it into the final cut, which begs the question, was it ever worth it? Today, we're not just talking about dangerous movies. We're diving into the ones that ignored every safety rule, gambled with human lives, and left behind real scars. These are the films where realism became obsession, where the audience saw only action, but the crew lived through horror. And the worst part? You probably never knew. Let's pull back the curtain and step into 15 action films that didn't just push boundaries. They obliterated them. 1. The movie, 1983. Imagine shooting a scene where a helicopter crashes mid-air and the crash is real. Now imagine it kills your lead actor and 2 children. That's exactly what happened on the set of The Twilight Zone, the movie. Directed in segments by 4 different filmmakers, the most infamous belonged to John Landis. The segment required actor Vic Morrow to rescue 2 Vietnamese children from an exploding village as a helicopter flew low overhead. But that night, things spiraled out of control, with explosions detonated too close and no proper clearance or supervision. The low-flying helicopter lost control and crashed directly onto the actors. Vic Morrow and the 2 children, aged 6 and 7, were decapitated and crushed on the spot. It wasn't just a tragedy, it was criminal. Landis and several crew members were charged with manslaughter. The production had hired children illegally, worked them after hours, and ignored basic safety procedures. Imagine shooting a scene where a helicopter crashes mid-air and the crash is real. Now imagine it kills your lead actor and 2 children, with explosions detonated too close and no proper clearance or supervision. The low-flying helicopter lost control and crashed directly onto the actors. Vic Morrow and the 2 children, aged 6 and 7, were decapitated and crushed on the spot. But by then, it was already too late. 2. Roar, 1981. How dangerous can a movie about animals really be? If you ask the cast and crew of Roar, the answer is unimaginably. This film, marketed as a family adventure about living peacefully with lions, was actually shot with over 100 real, untrained big cats. Director Noel Marshall, who also starred in the film, believed that if humans and wild animals coexisted long enough, harmony would naturally occur. What followed was pure chaos. Over 70 people were injured during filming. Actress Tippi Hedren had her leg crushed by an elephant. Her daughter, Melanie Griffith, was nearly scalped by a lion and required dozens of stitches to her face. The cinematographer was mauled, needing facial reconstructive surgery. Every shot of terror you see in the film, it's real. No stunt doubles, no CGI, just human beings running for their lives as lions leapt onto them for fun or hunger. Production took over a decade, drained millions, and ended in financial ruin. Insurance companies refused to cover the film. The cast, essentially Marshall's own family, endured years of trauma for what would eventually become a cult disaster. In the end, Roar wasn't a movie about humans living peacefully with nature. It was a cautionary tale about what happens when idealism meets teeth and claws. But Hollywood didn't learn its lesson, because next came a film where the jungle wasn't the danger, the war was. 3. Apocalypse Now, 1979. There's method acting, and then there's Apocalypse Now. Director Francis Ford Coppola didn't just want to recreate the Vietnam War, he wanted his crew to live it. The result was a shoot so chaotic, so dangerous, that it nearly killed the production and several people involved. Shot deep in the jungles of the Philippines, the film faced typhoons, malaria, and political instability. The sets were destroyed multiple times. Helicopters borrowed from the Filipino military were yanked mid-scene to fight real insurgents, but the worst was behind the camera. Martin Sheen, playing the lead, suffered a near-fatal heart attack during filming and kept it secret. Marlon Brando arrived overweight and unprepared, leading to tense rewrites and unplanned improvisation. Coppola himself threatened suicide, famously saying, "We had access to too much money, too much equipment, and little by little we went insane." Adding to the darkness, a real water buffalo was slaughtered on camera for one scene. No effects, no stunt, just blood. The film blurred the line between performance and breakdown. Many scenes weren't acted, they were breakdowns caught on film. Despite all this, Apocalypse Now is now hailed as a masterpiece. But its legacy is built on trauma, physical, mental, and artistic. And for the next film on our list, the horror wasn't in the jungle, it was in a child's bedroom. 4. The Exorcist, 1973. We all remember the chilling screams, the spinning head, the crucifix scene. But what many don't know is that The Exorcist was as cursed off-screen as it was terrifying on-screen. Adding to the darkness, a real water buffalo was slaughtered on camera for one scene. No effects, no stunt, just blood. The film blurred the line between performance and breakdown. Many scenes weren't acted, they were breakdowns caught on film. The set burned down mysteriously, delaying production for months. Cast members were injured or died unexpectedly. A total of 9 deaths were connected to the film during and after shooting. Even priests were brought in to bless the set. Friedkin later admitted to manipulating actors emotionally to get better performances. He was praised for his vision, but at what cost? The Exorcist became a landmark in horror. But behind the camera, it was less about possession and more about obsession. What's more disturbing, the demonic story on screen or the fact that its director was willing to hurt his actors to make it feel real? And just when you think it couldn't get more reckless, the next film decided to make chaos its only rule. 5. The Evil Dead, 1981. Low budget doesn't always mean low risk, and no film proved that better than The Evil Dead, the cult horror classic that nearly destroyed its own cast. Director Sam Raimi, then in his early 20s, was determined to create something raw and unforgettable. Armed with enthusiasm, fake blood, and almost no money, he took his actors into a remote cabin in the woods and left them there to suffer. There were no stunt doubles, no safety supervisors. The weather was freezing, the shoot ran for over 12 grueling weeks, and most of the cast got sick or injured. Bruce Campbell, the film's breakout star, twisted his ankle so badly he could barely walk, and Raimi kept filming him in pain, even poking the injury off-screen to provoke real reactions. The contact lenses used for the possessed characters were so thick, they caused temporary blindness. One actor burned himself with a hot light. Another got a tooth knocked out during a take. They slept on the floor, bathed rarely, and wore the same clothes for weeks. By the end, some of them weren't speaking to Raimi. Others just walked off set and never returned. And yet, The Evil Dead became a legend. A film built on creativity, grime, and a little too much disregard for safety. But Raimi's reckless youth would look tame compared to what Werner Herzog did in the jungle. Zex Fitzcarraldo, 1982. Imagine telling your crew, we're going to drag a 300-ton steamship over a mountain, for real. Not with effects, not with models, with ropes, mud, and muscle. That's what German director Werner Herzog did for Fitzcarraldo. The film follows a man who dreams of building an opera house in the Amazon, and to get there, he must move a boat overland between rivers. Most directors would fake the shot. Herzog insisted it be real. The production took place in remote Peruvian jungle, with no roads, no cranes, no backup plans. Indigenous workers were hired to physically haul the ship through mud and over steep inclines, a feat so difficult that engineers warned it was unsafe. Herzog ignored them. Multiple crew members were seriously injured. One man sliced open his leg with a chainsaw. Another had to be airlifted with a gangrene infection. The lead actor, Jason Robards, fell ill and had to be replaced halfway through. Klaus Kinski, the replacement, was so volatile that the local tribe offered to kill him for Herzog. The story behind Fitzcarraldo became more famous than the film itself. It was a triumph of will and an indictment of artistic madness. The jungle swallowed time, money, and sanity. But Herzog didn't blink, because to him, cinema was worth it even if people bled. And next, we arrive at the most infamous on-set death in modern Hollywood history. 7. The Crow, 1994. Multiple crew members were seriously injured. One man sliced open his leg with a chainsaw. Another had to be airlifted with a gangrene infection. The lead actor, Jason Robards, fell ill and had to be replaced halfway through. Klaus Kinski, the replacement, was so volatile that the local tribe offered to kill him for Herzog. The Crow was meant to be Brandon Lee's breakout role, the son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee, finally stepping into his own spotlight. But what was supposed to be a career-defining performance became a tragedy that shocked Hollywood. During filming, a prop gun was improperly loaded with a live bullet fragment left inside the chamber. When the gun was fired during a take, it struck Brandon in the abdomen. He collapsed on set and never regained consciousness. He died hours later at just 28 years old. Investigations revealed a chain of negligence, unsafe storage, amateur handling of firearms, and a rushed production trying to cut corners. It was eerily similar to the circumstances surrounding his father's mysterious death 2 decades earlier. Brandon's death halted filming. The studio considered canceling the movie entirely, but in the end, they used body doubles and digital effects to complete the project, releasing it in his memory. Ironically, The Crow is a story about vengeance from beyond the grave. What audiences didn't realize was how real that theme would become. Lee's death didn't just scar the production. It reignited long-standing debates over on-set firearm safety, especially in low-budget action film. But tragically, that lesson wouldn't be learned, because decades later, another gun would be fired on set, and history would repeat itself. 8. Ben-Hur 1959. Before CGI, before safety rigs, there was Ben-Hur. And to create one of the most iconic action scenes in film history, MGM was willing to risk lives. The legendary chariot race sequence wasn't just cinematic magic, it was a deadly ballet of real horses, real dirt, and real speed. Shot over 5 weeks with hundreds of extras, the scene used no visual effects, just practical stunts and split-second timing. Horses collided, chariots flipped, stuntmen were thrown into the air and trampled. One suffered such serious injuries that rumors of an on-set death swirled for decades. While no fatalities were officially recorded, several performers were hospitalized. Star Charlton Heston did many of his own stunts, including driving a 4-horse chariot at full speed. Director William Wyler pushed for authenticity, insisting on wide shots and real crashes. The scene remains breathtaking to this day, but its cost was measured in broken bones and concussions. Horses collided, chariots flipped, stuntmen were thrown into the air and trampled. One suffered such serious injuries that rumors of an on-set death swirled for decades. While no fatalities were officially recorded, several performers were hospitalized. And while the chariot race made film history, it also set a dangerous precedent that the more real it looked, the more glorious the risk. A mindset that would fuel one of the wildest and most hazardous franchises of the next decade. 9. Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, 1981. The desert, the leather, the roar of engines and chaos. Mad Max 2 was gritty, raw, and frighteningly real. Director George Miller, a former emergency room doctor, understood trauma, but he also knew what made a car crash look spectacular. With a minimal budget and a team of fearless stunt drivers, The Road Warrior became a symphony of speed and destruction. One of the most harrowing stunts involved a motorcycle crash where the rider flips mid-air, lands on his back, and skids across the pavement. It wasn't CGI. It wasn't even fully choreographed. Stuntman Guy Norris lost control mid-jump, crashed for real, and broke his leg. That exact take was used in the final film. Explosions were timed by hand. Seatbelts were minimal. Cars were modified with metal sheets and hope. The stunt crew joked that it wasn't a shoot, it was a demolition derby with cameras. Yet Mad Max 2 raised the bar for action cinema. Every dented fender and flying body felt real. Because it was. It proved that spectacle didn't need Hollywood money, just courage and a total disregard for fear. But that same mindset nearly claimed lives and pushed every shoot to the edge. And in the next story, a production would reach even further, chasing its dream into oblivion. 10. The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, Terry Gilliam, 2018. This film took nearly 30 years to make, and it almost destroyed everyone who tried. Director Terry Gilliam had dreamed of adapting Don Quixote since the 90 Seconds, but the production was so cursed, it became a legend of failure. The original attempt in 2000 was shut down after flash floods washed away the set. Fighter jets from a nearby NATO base ruined audio, and the lead actor, Jean Rochefort, herniated a disc and had to quit. It didn't stop there. Legal battles, dropped financing, and casting collapses plagued every attempt. By the time filming finally resumed in 2017, Gilliam had poured decades of energy and frustration into a story about a man chasing an impossible dream. During the new shoot, multiple injuries hit the cast and crew. Weather destroyed equipment. Locations were lost mid-production. Gilliam himself suffered a minor stroke just before the premiere. Even the release rights were tangled in court, preventing the film from opening in many countries. The result? A film that felt like an echo of its own, making chaotic, delusional, haunted by obsession. The irony is brutal. The Man Who Killed Don Quixote is about a man who refuses to see reality, convinced of a destiny no one else believes in. So was Gilliam brave, or just as mad as his protagonist? Either way, few productions were more painful, and yet nothing in it compares to the next film, where the fictional horror was nothing compared to what really happened on camera. 11. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. It was marketed as the most realistic horror film ever made, and that's because parts of it were real. The result? A film that felt like an echo of its own, making chaotic, delusional, haunted by obsession. To sell the illusion, Deodato made the actors disappear from public view for months. He only avoided prison after proving they were alive, bringing them to court in person. 11. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. Several animals were killed on screen, including a monkey, turtle, pig, and muskrat, all slaughtered in real time, in close-up. The cruelty sparked outrage from critics and viewers alike. One scene of a woman impaled on a wooden spike was so convincing, it became a centerpiece in the murder investigation. Though now considered a cult film, Cannibal Holocaust is banned in multiple countries and remains one of the most controversial movies ever made. It raised a disturbing question. If a film sacrifices ethics for realism, does it still count as fiction? Next comes a story that didn't need gore or horror to scar its actors, because this time, the pain went straight to the mind. 12. Come and See, 1985. You'd think a Soviet anti-war film wouldn't belong on this list, but Come and See didn't just depict trauma, it inflicted it. Directed by Elim Klimov, the film follows a teenage boy descending into the madness of Nazi-occupied Belarus. It's considered one of the most emotionally devastating war films ever made, largely because it was created under unthinkable conditions. The lead actor, Alexei Kravchenko, was only 14 years old. To prepare him for the role, Klimov reportedly fed him little, deprived him of sleep, and forced him to witness harrowing scenes without explanation. At one point, the boy was nearly hypnotized to dull his emotions during filming. Real explosives were detonated dangerously close to the cast. Live ammunition was used near actors. In the final scenes, Kravchenko's face gaunt, shaking, blank, is not acting. That's what psychological trauma looks like on screen. After filming, the boy went silent for weeks. He later described the experience as being ripped out of reality. He would never act in another film of that magnitude again. But Come and See remains a towering achievement, a brutal, poetic scream against war. A film where the camera didn't observe madness, it created it. And in the next entry, an actor wouldn't just fake hardship, he would eat raw meat, sleep in a dead animal, and bleed for his Oscar. 13. The Revenant, 2015. Oscar winners often go deep for their roles, but Leonardo DiCaprio didn't just go deep, he went feral. In The Revenant, director Alejandro G. Iñárritu demanded brutal realism. No green screens, no fake snow, no sound stages. They shot in freezing wilderness across Canada and Argentina, often using only natural light. DiCaprio, known for his precision, pushed himself further than ever before. He ate raw bison liver despite being a vegetarian. He slept in a real animal carcass. He waded through icy rivers and endured sub-zero temperatures without stunt double. Crew members reportedly quit en masse due to the miserable conditions. To capture one iconic scene, DiCaprio crawled through snow for miles while bleeding from actual cuts. His beard froze, his body shook. The scene where he's attacked by a bear? shot using a 300-pound stuntman in a blue suit, slammed repeatedly onto the ground, leaving Leo bruised and barely able to walk. It was all in the name of authenticity, and it worked. DiCaprio finally won the Oscar that had eluded him for decades. But many questioned whether the extremity was necessary. Was the suffering real for the art, or just to build a myth? With The Revenant, pain became performance. And few realized how close it all came to disaster until the same mistake repeated on another set. This time, someone wouldn't walk away. 14. Rust, 2021. It was supposed to be a modest indie western. Instead, Rust became one of the most tragic accidents in modern film history. On the 21st of October 2021, during rehearsal on set in New Mexico, actor Alec Baldwin was handed a prop gun. Told it was cold safe, he aimed and pulled the trigger. The gun fired a real bullet. It struck cinematographer Helena Hutchins in the chest, killing her. Director Joel Souza was also injured. The crew froze. They thought it was a drill. Then they saw the blood. Investigations uncovered a horrifying web of negligence. A non-union armorer with minimal experience, complaints of unsafe conditions, and previous accidental discharges. Crew members had walked off set just hours before, citing safety concern. The incident reignited debates about firearm use in Hollywood, echoing the death of Brandon Lee nearly 30 years earlier. And yet the same corner cutting, the same arrogance had returned. Baldwin was charged with involuntary manslaughter. Lawsuits flew. Production halted. But Hutchins was gone, a rising star, mother, artist lost to a senseless, preventable tragedy. In the end, Rust wasn't just a story about recklessness. It became a symbol of everything broken in an industry that too often puts speed over safety. And as haunting as that was, one more film dares to ask, what if the danger wasn't on set, but in the audience? 15. Enter the Void, 2009. There are films that challenge you. Then there's Enter the Void, a film that physically hurt its viewers. Directed by Gaspar Noé, the film is a psychedelic first-person journey through death, rebirth, and the Tokyo underworld. But more than the story, it's the visuals that scarred audiences. Noé used constant flashing lights, flickering strobe effects, and intense color shifts to simulate hallucinations. The camera never cuts, floating from one moment to the next like a soul without a body. It's hypnotic, overwhelming, and for many, dangerous. Multiple viewers experienced seizures, nausea, and panic attacks. Screenings had to include medical warnings. Some theaters refused to show the film entirely, but Noé didn't apologize. He said he wanted the audience to feel the trip, not just watch it. Was it genius or sensory abuse? Enter the Void didn't injure actors. It attacked the audience. It's a film where the danger wasn't behind the scenes, but directly in front of your eyes. And it's a fitting end to this list, a reminder that when realism becomes obsession, someone always pays the price. Bonus fact, Man Bites Dog, 1,992. This one didn't make the top 15, but it might just be the strangest of all. What happens when a film crew follows a serial killer and starts helping him? That's the premise of Man Bites Dog, a Belgian black comedy shot in documentary style. But what started as satire turned into something disturbingly meta. The film follows a charismatic killer named Ben as he robs, murders, and philosophizes on life. At first, the crew films passively, but as the story escalates, they begin to hold lights, open doors, even help dispose of bodies. They cross the line from observers to accomplices. While entirely scripted, the film blurred lines so effectively that early audiences believed it was real. But the deeper discomfort comes not from Ben, but from the filmmaker's slow descent into amorality. Even more disturbing, the actors were also the actual directors, playing fictional versions of themselves, portraying a crew that surrenders ethics for the sake of art. When Man Bites Dog premiered at Cannes, it sparked walkouts and applause. Some praised its daring critique of media complicity, others saw it as nihilistic and dangerous. It was later banned in several countries, and remains one of the most unsettling mockumentaries ever made. The genius of Man Bites Dog is simple and terrifying. It doesn't just question how far a killer will go, it asks how far you'll go if you're holding the camera. And after all we've seen from helicopters to hallucinations, it's a fitting final question. When does realism become recklessness? How much suffering is too much for the sake of a perfect shot? From crushed helicopters to raw bison liver, every film on this list asked, and sometimes ignored those questions. But now it's your turn. Which of these moments shocked you the most? Do you think these filmmakers were visionaries or villains? And in the age of CGI, would you still choose something real if it came at a real cost? Tell us below. We're listening.